What's going on, guys? This is Al B back with another video. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the brand new plugin from Audio Modern called Chord Jam. Now, Chord Jam is a random chord generator that allows you to create chords as well as chord progressions for your tracks. Now, it's not going to be totally random. Of course, it's going to sound musical because it is based off of music theory. All you have to do is set your scale, make a few other clicks, and you're going to be able to randomly generate chords and modify those chords if you don't like them. You still have a lot of control after they are generated, and that's what makes Chord Jam really powerful. Before we get too deep into it, guys, hit that like button for me, hit that subscribe button so I can keep bringing y'all this good content, all right? We're going to hop into FL Studio. We're going to take a closer look at Chord Jam. We're going to try to use it on the track that I am making and see what we can come up with, and we're going to have some fun. So without further ado, guys, this is Al B. Let's get into it. Yes, sir. All right, guys, here in front of us, we have it. This is the Chord Jam interface. I'm a big fan of the interface. I like the purple aesthetic. If you've been following me for any amount of time, you know that's kind of my jam. No pun intended. So Chord Jam has three main sections to the interface. I'm going to talk through each of them in a little more detail as we go through the video here, but I'm going to just start by just kind of pointing out some really high level details. All right. So one thing to note about Chord Jam is that it doesn't actually make sound itself. It's just like a MIDI generator. And so if you want to play chords with another instrument, and in my case, I'm using FL Studio, I'm going to come here and I'm going to set the Chord Jam output port to 2, and then I want Chord Jam to control my analog lab. So I come to the analog lab channel and I'm going to set the input port to 2. So now when I generate a chord with Chord Jam, it's going to actually play in analog lab. Okay, so that's the first thing you got to do to get Chord Jam to work. If you want to hear what it sounds like while you're playing with it, go ahead and tie it to the MIDI channel for the instrument you want it to play. All right. The top section is the chord creation, where you're going to set your scale and the key and what chords you want generated, as well as controlling the different randomization options within here. So that's your chord creation section. Coming down, you have your sequencer section. And as the name would imply, this is where you're going to sequence out your chords. If you just click on this icon on the right hand side here, it takes you to the pad section. And here is where you would assign different chords to the different pads, right? And then you would have these pads mapped to your MIDI controller in a way that you want it. And this would be really helpful in the case of like live performances, or even if that's how you record your tracks as kind of freestyle, then this would be a great way to do that. And you can map the pads directly inside of Chord Jam. So you don't have to fight with the DAW too much. You can just set it right here inside of Chord Jam. It tells you which channels they are, and you just have to map that on your MIDI controller. All right, so that's a quick high-level overview. You have your chord creation section, your sequencer section, and finally you had your pad section. So now we're going to go back through and take a little bit of a deeper look into each of these individual sections and talk a little bit more about what you can do. All right, now that we've gone over the main sections of Chord Jam, let's take a closer look at the chord creation section. The chord creation section here is going to be where you spend most of your time, and where you set the main parameters is where you set the main options for the plugin. First things first, you got to set the scale so that it knows what scale to create the chords in. I know my song is in the scale of F minor, so that's what I'm going to select here, F minor, and you can see the list of other scales that you have to choose from as well. If you don't know the scale that your song is in, if you're a trap producer or a hip hop producer and you're using a sample or a loop, or any kind of producer, right? If you're using a sample or a loop and you don't know the scale of it, the good news is you can just drag it into Chord Jam and it will tell you. You can grab the sample from your browser in your DAW and drag it into Chord Jam, or you can hit the search icon and still you can go search for it. Okay. I prefer to just drag in the audio file. In my case, I'm going to use this sample that's going to be in my upcoming Misophonia loop kit. So let me just drag it over. Boom, it detected it properly. It's actually specifically F sharp minor. Chord Jam is detecting it as maybe it's F sharp Dorian, but it gets you going in the right direction. Okay. So that's going to be helpful if you are using samples and loops and you don't know the scale you're starting with. All right. So we got the scale set in F minor. Now let's take a look at these other parameters. Here you have your octave, so you can change what octave the chords are playing in. Okay, I'm gonna keep it right there in the center, and you can change the different types of chord that we're selecting from. Right now, I have it set to just choose a minor scale, just keeping it super simple for now, just for the sake of the video. Coming down some, you have your different voices. And your voices, if you don't know, are pretty much just the individual notes of a chord. So because I have a minor chord, which is just 3 notes, then I only have 3 voices over here that I can actually, play around with. I only have 3 voices that I can choose between. The voices, you can just select whether this particular voice plays at a low octave, in the middle, or at a high octave. Okay, so. All right, so you can kind of have some control over the way the different voices are being played. When you see an infinity icon anywhere in this chord creation section, what it does is it changes the settings every time you press a key. It randomly selects new settings. All of those from me just pressing the F key on my keyboard. It plays the chord and it's randomly selecting between the octave of each voice. If you find one you like, just hit the lock icon and it no longer will select between them. Okay. If you want to reset everything, hit the reset icon and it'll put everything back in the center. Now, if I chose a different chord type, this is just a minor scale, but if I chose like a minor 9, then all of a sudden you see I have voices 4 and 5. So the chord type you pick will kind of dictate how many voices you have to play with. For simplicity, let's put it back to minor. All right, bet. Now, moving over to the middle section, we have the velocity, and pretty self-explanatory. The velocity is where you can determine how loud or how quiet the individual voices may be. So when you look here, you see these 2 dots. You can think of these as just your range. So the lowest your velocity will be is here, and the highest your velocity can be is here. So whenever you're randomizing your velocity, it's going to always stay between these 2 dots. See? And you will notice the top voice is moving even though they aren't active because, again, I'm just playing a minor scale. But I like my velocities to be a little closer than that, something like that. That's how I like my velocities to be. The same type of deal that we had with voices. If you hit the infinity icon, every time I press a key on my keyboard, it's going to randomly select a new set of velocities. If I find a velocity set that I like, I just hit my lock icon and it no longer changes. Want to reset, just hit the reset button and it goes back to defaults as far as the actual velocities and the range. Okay. Moving over to the right is where you have your different time options for the timing of your chord. So let's just start on the left, which is your ARP. Very self-explanatory. I'm going to select random. If I press F, it's going to arpeggiate. It's going to arpeggiate going up and down randomly. I can change the rate to a eighth or to something like a quarter. Okay. If I hit the infinity icon to randomize different things, it's going to randomly go between random up and down and the other arpeggiator options. So every time I press a key, it's randomly picking the different arpeggiator option. You can change your rate here and you can change the amount of swing. Okay. Coming out here to the time, this is where you can determine the timing of the individual voices. So do I want all of my notes to hit at exactly the same time when I make a chord, or do I want there to be some off time, right, to make it sound more human and to make it sound more natural? I'm not going to make my time range this big. I'm going to bring it in some just so they're a little bit off sometimes. And let's randomly generate one and see. That's still too much of a difference for me. Let me bring this one up. Oh no, let me bring this one. Perfect. I'm going to hit the infinity knob and I'm going to cycle through until I get a good timing. This one sounds pretty good to me, so now let me just lock it or just turn that off. And so there I have it, guys. I have created my chord. I've created how I want the voices to act. I've created my range of velocity, and I've created my time. So that's how you set the main parameters for your chords. Now, when you come down here to your sequencer section, you can turn it off or turn it on. And just in case you want to turn it off in case you want to just play your chords live, like. If you just want to play your chords, you can do that and you don't have to actually set a sequence. But if you want to play it along to a beat or something like that, then you would come down here and this is where you would use your sequencer to do that. So you have two main lanes here. You have your robot lane, which is where Chord Jam will put the automatically generated chords that it creates for you based on the settings that you set here and based on the settings you set in the chord creation section. Then you have your human lane, which is basically if you want to paint in your own sequence of chords, you can do that. And it's going to be based off of the last one you click. So if I click F and I come here and click and drag, it's going to paint an F for me. And so if I go to a new pattern and let's just play it, it's going to play that, right? And you can set the number of steps that you have. I have mine set to 64 steps. It can quantize down to 1/16 of a note. Here is where you select the notes that will be chosen between when you have your chords automatically generated. Over here is where you can set the different type of grooves, which will determine how the automatically generated chords are kind of spaced apart and how long they are held. So you have your different options there. So I'm going to paint in that chord. Let's paint in the A chord as well. Pull that back some. And just click it and bring in or G sharp major. And then let's paint in another one. I'm just kind of doing this freehand. I don't even know. Now let's see what that sounds like. I think it'll sound better if this hit a little bit sooner. Okay. And those chords, they're cool. And the thing about it is if you don't like the way a chord is played, you can go and you can change the voices. So if I don't like the first chord, I can click it and I can come change different stuff about it. Like, let me bring down these two. Let me bring them all three down. Yeah, honestly, I'm kind of cool with the way it is. But you can see, if you click them, you can change the different parameters for each individual chord. And the same thing with the ones that are generated by the robot. If you click this little menu icon right here, you're going to be able to use some of the factory preset chord progressions. And these are some of the more common chord progressions, right? So you have a lot of different ones that you can choose from. I'm going to select this one right here and you can see it's C, D, F, G. There's a chord progression there. So let's close it out. And you can see that it selects those notes here as well. And so when I go to generate a sequence, it's going to use these chords as well as this particular groove here that I have set to come up with a chord progression. So let's see what this one sounds like here. And if we don't like it, we'll change it. It sounded okay. Let me try EDM 2 with that again. Okay, I like that better. All right, so you can see right there, it's pretty powerful. Just a couple of clicks and I got a pretty good chord progression that goes pretty well with the beat that I already have going in the background. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to snag that sequence up out of there and I'm going to put that on Analog Lab. Let's make a new pattern here in FL Studio. Rename this to Progression 3, I think this is. And I'm going to just drag the sequence right here. Boom. And just like that, I have that progression here and I can come back to my song. Let me disable Chord Jam and I can still play it. Here goes some other chords that I came up with. Chord jam. All right, guys. So I hope you enjoyed it. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button so I can keep bringing you guys this dope content. Until next time, this is Al B, and we are out. Yes, sir.